At my son's funeral, his wife screamed at me in front of everyone. Not whispered, not pulled me aside. She shouted, "Get out of my house in 30 days, old man." The church went silent. You could hear the florist's van idle outside. I felt every eye in that room land on my back like hands pushing me forward, waiting to see if I'd break. I didn't. I smiled. That's the part people still argue about. Because what kind of father smiles at his son's funeral? Stay with me, because that smile is where this story really begins. And if stories like this matter to you, subscribe now. Some truths don't come with warnings. The service was held in Westchester County, cold enough to make your breath visible. Stone church, tall ceilings, too much echo. My boy's photo sat beside the casket, him squinting into the sun, one hand shielding his eyes the way he always did when he laughed. I'm 68. Knees ache, shoulder clicks when I lift my arm. I've lived long enough to know grief comes in waves, not speeches. But that day, grief was interrupted by something sharper. His wife, Lydia Rowe, stood at the pulpit and cried like a professional. Perfect timing, perfect pauses. She talked about our beautiful home, about the life he built, about moving forward. She never said my name. Looking back, that was the first cut. After the service, people drifted to the house, the big one with the white columns, the one neighbors used to slow down and stare at. I sat on the edge of a leather chair, hands folded, listening to strangers tell me how proud I must be. I was, and I was tired. Lydia disappeared upstairs. When she came back down, her face had changed. The softness drained out of it like someone pulled a plug. She planted herself in front of me, arms crossed, voice loud enough to carry through the room. "Frank, you need to leave my house." I looked up, said nothing. She took that as permission. "I'm giving you 30 days. I need space, I need peace, and frankly, this isn't healthy for me." Then she raised her voice. That's when the word "old man" came out. People froze. A neighbor dropped a plate. Someone whispered my son's name like it might calm the room. It didn't. Here's a question for you. What would you have done? Argued? Begged? Made a scene? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. I stood up slowly. My knees complained. I let them. I picked up my coat and said, "You won't need to wait 30 days. That's when I smiled. Not a happy smile, not a cruel one either. It was the kind of smile you give when a chess game finally makes sense. I packed my bags that night, didn't tell anyone, didn't call a lawyer, didn't raise my voice. I walked out before sunrise while the house still smelled like flowers and cold coffee. By noon, she thought she'd won. That's important. Remember that. I spent that night in a roadside motel off Interstate 95, the kind with flickering lights and a vending machine that only takes exact change. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying my boy's last phone call, 3 weeks before he died. He sounded tired, not sick, just careful. He asked me questions about paperwork, about what happens if something ever goes wrong. He didn't explain. He didn't need to. Parents learn to hear what isn't said. I asked if he was okay. He paused, then said, "If anything happens to me, don't let her hurt anyone else." At the time, I thought he meant emotionally. If you're still watching, don't look away now. This is where it turns. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Missed calls, voicemails, a text that read, "What did you do?" I turned on the TV. Police cars, blue lights, my son's house, her house, cordoned off with tape, officers carrying boxes out the front door. They didn't knock, they kicked. Now here's the part that makes people uncomfortable. Some say I planned it, some say I waited for this moment. The truth is quieter. All I did was make one phone call and sign one document. And that document did something Lydia never expected. It asked questions. Questions that reached into places she'd spent years keeping dark. If this happened in your town tomorrow, wouldn't you want to know first? Subscribe. Don't be caught off guard. By evening, the story was everywhere. Not my name, hers. Investigators looking into irregularities, financial activity spanning Florida, Arizona, California. People she met through charity luncheons, community centers, faith groups. Folks who trusted a smile and a promise. Here's what most people miss. The loudest person in the room is rarely the one in control. That night, I sat in the motel parking lot, my phone in my hand, watching the sun go down behind the highway. I felt grief, I felt relief, and I felt something else. Something I hadn't felt since my boy was little and took his first steps without falling. Resolve. You might think this is a revenge story about a house. It isn't. It's about what my son knew, what he did quietly, and why that smile at the funeral scared people who understood it. And if you think this chapter ends with sirens and headlines, no, that's just the door opening. Next time, I'll tell you what the paperwork actually said and why the police weren't the only ones looking for Lydia that week. Was that smile justice or something darker? Comment below.
The first time I ever held that trust folder in my hands, my boy was still alive. He was standing in my kitchen in New Haven, back when he still wore cheap boots and talked about someday. He'd just gotten promoted, a real job, real money. He wanted a house big enough for a garden, a dog, maybe children. He also wanted to do it right. So did I. That's why, years before Lydia ever stepped into his life with her polished smile and her perfume that smelled like expensive lies, I protected him the only way I knew how, with paperwork. Folks laugh when an old man says that. They think paperwork is boring, until it saves your life. And if you've ever had someone smile in your face while planning your downfall, subscribe now. This story is for people who've been underestimated. That morning after the funeral, while Lydia was still high on power, still replaying her little performance in that living room, I was sitting in a motel chair with my phone and a pen. I called Mason Hargrove. Not a flashy lawyer, not one of those TV ones. Mason was the kind who wore old suits and kept his files neat. He'd handled work contracts for me decades ago. Good man, quiet man, dangerous in a courtroom. He picked up on the second ring. "Frank," he said, like he'd been expecting me. That chilled me. "You saw the news?" I asked. "He saw what happened at the service," he said. "Someone sent me a video." I went still. My jaw tightened. People recorded it. Of course they did. This country loves a spectacle, especially when it's an old man getting humiliated. Mason didn't sound angry. He sounded careful. "Did she threaten you?" he asked. "She ordered me," I said, like I was furniture. Mason exhaled. "Then we do this properly." I didn't ask what this meant. I just said, "Open the file." Here's the thing Lydia never bothered to learn. That house wasn't owned the way most people think. It wasn't his, it wasn't hers, it wasn't even theirs. It belonged to the Delaney Family Living Trust. A trust I created years ago for one reason. So no matter what life threw at my son, nobody could snatch his foundation out from under him. Mason explained it like this. "Your boy was the beneficiary, Frank. He lived there, he paid bills. It looked like his home because it was, but control stayed with you." "So she gets nothing," I said. "She gets exactly what the document gives her," he said, "and it gives her nothing." I stared at the motel carpet, threadbare, stained, like life when you don't protect it. You might be thinking, why didn't the son put her on it? That's the part that haunts me. He didn't, and now I know why. Mason told me something else, something I didn't know. "Frank," he said, "your son called me." My heart lurched. When? 3 weeks ago. The same week my boy called me and asked those strange questions.
Mason kept talking. He asked about removing someone's access to financial assets, asked about emergency clauses, asked what happens if a spouse becomes a legal risk. A legal risk? I felt my throat tighten. Did he say why? Mason hesitated. That's when I knew. When men like Mason hesitate, it's because the truth is heavy. He finally said he found things. He didn't tell me everything, but he said he didn't feel safe. I gripped the edge of the motel table so hard my knuckles turned white. My boy didn't feel safe in his own home. If that hits you in the chest, you're not alone. And if you've ever ignored a gut feeling about someone close, tell me, what did it cost you? Drop it in the comments. Mason instructed me to sign one document, a reassertion of control. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't theatrical, it was one page, one signature. But that signature did something Lydia never anticipated. It triggered an internal review. Because when a trust shifts control, banks and title companies don't just shrug, they check the chain, they verify, they ask why. And when they ask why, they start noticing details, like accounts that don't match income, like transfers that hop states, like payments to companies that don't exist. Mason said, once we file this, you don't call her, you don't go back, you let the process move. I asked, what if she sells the house? He said, she can't, she doesn't have authority, she never did. For the first time since my son died, my lungs filled fully. But the relief didn't last, because right after we filed, Mason called back, and his voice had changed. Frank, he said, there's something else. That sentence is never good. Your son filed for divorce. My heart lurched. No. Yes. I stared at the blank motel wall. He never told me. He didn't want you in the middle, Mason said, but he filed 2 days before he died. 2 days. That timing punched the air out of me. Mason continued. He included a sworn statement, said he feared retaliation if she learned, said he suspected fraud. Fraud? So it wasn't just a bad marriage, it was a trap. And my son, my boy, tried to climb out. Then he died. Now I'm going to say something that some people won't like. That kind of timing doesn't sit right in an old man's bones. By afternoon, my phone lit up again, a number I didn't recognize. I answered. A woman's voice. Firm, professional. Mr. Delaney, this is Detective Ilara Voss, New York State. Detective. My heart started thudding. She said, I have questions about your son's financial arrangements and about his wife. I didn't speak. She added, we executed a warrant this morning. We found documents inside the home that complicate things. Complicate things. That's what they say when the truth is uglier than the public is ready. Finally, I asked, is she under arrest? Not yet, Detective Voss said, but she's not going anywhere. Then she said the line that made my stomach turn cold. Mr. Delaney, did your son ever mention a life insurance policy to you? I felt my throat go dry. No, I said. Detective Voss paused. He didn't sign it, but it exists. And right then in that motel room, I understood something. This wasn't about a house. This was about a woman who thought she could bury a man and inherit the world. And my son, my boy, left breadcrumbs before he died. Enough breadcrumbs to lead the law straight to her door. If you're still here, don't blink, because in the next chapter, I'll tell you what the police found in the bedroom drawer and why Lydia's crying at the pulpit looked like rehearsal. Was my son sick, or was he hunted? You tell me. When people talk about investigations, they imagine flashing lights and slammed doors. That's not how this started. It started with a drawer. Detective Ilara Voss didn't tell me that at first. She let me sit with the silence on the phone, the kind that stretches your thoughts thin. Then she said, there's a bedroom drawer in the house, bottom right, locked. I didn't respond. She continued anyway. It wasn't on the inventory list your son gave his attorney. That sentence landed heavier than the funeral casket, because my boy documented everything. Receipts, warranties, manuals for tools he barely used. If something existed in that house and wasn't listed, It meant one thing. It wasn't his. If you've ever discovered something in your own home that made your stomach drop, you know the feeling. And if you don't want to miss where this leads, stay subscribed. This part separates accidents from intent. The warrant gave them access to everything: closets, safes, digital backups. But that drawer took time. 3 locksmiths refused the job once they saw the internal mechanism. Too custom, too deliberate. That alone raised eyebrows. When they finally got it open, the room went quiet. Inside weren't clothes, not jewelry. It was paperwork. Policies, statements, copies of IDs, old envelopes with dates written in neat ink, and one manila folder with a printed label: contingency. Detective Voss told me later that seasoned officers know when a scene shifts. She said the air changes, people stop moving, someone swallows hard. That's what happened when they opened the folder. Inside was a life insurance policy. Not small, not accidental. A 7-figure policy, taken out 18 months earlier, with one condition highlighted in yellow: payout valid only if death ruled natural. No beneficiary signature from my son, only hers. Let that sink in. Now here's where some viewers split into camps. Some say paperwork doesn't prove motive. Others say paperwork is motive. Where do you stand? Comment it. I want to know. Detective Voss didn't accuse me of anything. She didn't accuse Lydia either. Not yet. She just asked questions. Had my son mentioned chest pain? Any supplements? Any new routines? I told her about the jogging, the fitness kick, how proud he sounded, how sudden it was. She listened, took notes, didn't interrupt. Then she asked something that still rattles me. Did he ever feel he was watched? I closed my eyes. 3 weeks before he died, he joked about changing his password, said it was just good practice. I laughed it off. Old men laugh things off because we don't want to imagine danger inside our own families. That was my mistake. By that evening, Lydia was no longer shouting. She was calling. Voicemail after voicemail. Her voice cracked now. Different tone. Did you ever say he felt watched? Frank, we need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding. You're letting strangers turn you against me. Strangers. That word did something to me, because the only strangers in this story were the people she thought she could fool. If this were you, would you answer that call? Be honest. Type it below. I didn't. I listened. That's another thing old age teaches you. People reveal more when you don't interrupt them. The next discovery came from her laptop. Deleted files, recovered fragments, emails drafted but never sent. One stood out. It wasn't addressed to my son. It was addressed to a claims adjuster. Dated weeks before his death. Subject line: clarification on natural cause determinations. Think about that. Not grief, not concern. Preparation. When Detective Voss read that aloud, no one spoke for a full minute. One officer muttered, "That's not how people in love talk." That night, I sat on a bench outside the motel, phone resting on my knee, watching trucks pass like ghosts. I realized something then. The funeral scene wasn't her first performance. It was rehearsal. If this story feels too close to home, you're not imagining it. These things don't happen loudly. They happen politely. Subscribe. You don't want to miss what polite evil looks like. The medical examiner reopened the case the next morning. Routine, they said. But routines don't usually involve subpoenas. They requested supplement bottles from the house, protein powders, capsules, anything my son had been taking for health. One bottle had no label, just white pills. Detective Voss asked me, "Did he ever take medication without telling you?" "No," I said. "He hated pills." She nodded slowly. "Then we'll find out what these are." That's when the clock started ticking, because once toxicology gets involved, timelines matter, evidence degrades, stories change. And Lydia knew it. That afternoon, she tried something else. She went public. Tears, interviews, statements about harassment and grieving widows being targeted. People believed her, at first. That's always how it starts. Here's the uncomfortable part. Victims don't always look like victims, and predators don't always look cruel. Where do you draw the line? I'm asking you, not the comment section. Late that night, Detective Voss called again. "Mr. Delaney," she said, "I can't tell you everything, but I can tell you this." I held my breath. She didn't just plan for his death. My stomach tightened. She planned for after. I asked, what after? There was a pause. She planned for after you. That word hit harder than anything else. After me, meaning the house, the trust, the obstacle, meaning I was never supposed to be sitting on that motel bench listening to trucks roll by. I was supposed to be gone. If that realization just chilled you, you're still with me. And if you think this ends with handcuffs, you don't understand people like Lydia. Next chapter, I'll tell you about the document my son hid outside the house, the one she never found, and why her biggest mistake wasn't the shouting. It was underestimating an old man who knows how to wait. Do you think this was murder, or just greed gone wrong? Say it.
There are two kinds of secrets. The ones you hide in your house, and the ones you hide from it. My son understood that difference. That's why Lydia never found the envelope. If you've ever trusted someone enough to live under the same roof and still felt the need to hide something, stay with me. This chapter matters. Detective Ilara Voss didn't tell me about the envelope right away. She waited until I'd finished explaining my son's routines, the jogging, the supplements, the way he used to stop by the community garden on Saturdays to help the older folks set up raised beds. Then she asked a strange question. "Did your son rent a storage unit?" I frowned. "Not that I know of." She nodded. "We didn't think so either, but he rented a safe deposit box. Small, local branch. Opened 6 months ago." 6 months. That timing sat heavy. People don't open safe deposit boxes for birthday cards. I felt my chest tighten. What was inside? She said, "An envelope, sealed, addressed to me." That's when I had to sit down. The envelope wasn't fancy. No return address, no dramatic handwriting, just my son's neat block letters and one sentence written across the flap. If you're reading this, she already knows. Let that sink in. He didn't write if something happens, he wrote when. Detective Voss told me they opened it with 2 witnesses present, chain of custody, gloves, camera rolling. Inside were copies, bank transfers, email printouts, a timeline written in his hand, dates, times, notes in the margins, and one line underlined twice. She believes I won't notice small numbers. That sentence broke me, because my boy noticed everything. He just didn't confront people loudly. He planned. If you've ever underestimated someone because they stayed quiet, ask yourself, who else have you misjudged? The timeline showed patterns. Small withdrawals, donations, consulting fees, money moving from one account to another, then vanishing into shell companies with clean names and empty offices. It wasn't sloppy. It was practiced. And here's the part that shifted everything. The envelope also contained a letter, not to the police, to me. I hadn't seen my son's handwriting since the funeral program. Seeing it again felt like being punched and hugged at the same time. He wrote, "Dad, if this ends the way I think it might, I need you to be careful. I don't think she's reckless. I think she's patient. And I think she believes you're weak." Weak. I let out a sound that might have been a laugh. Old men hear that word a lot. Detective Voss said something next that made my skin prickle. "She tried to access the box," she said. "When?" 2 days after his death. 2 days. Before the funeral, before the shouting, before she told me to leave. She'd already been searching. She just didn't know where to look.
That envelope never touched the house. That was the point. My son knew anything under that roof belonged to her eyes first. If this were your child, would you feel pride or terror? Tell me, I mean it. The letter ended with instructions, not orders, requests. If you're reading this and I'm gone, don't confront her. Don't warn her. Let systems do what people won't. Systems. Banks, courts, records, cameras. My son didn't want revenge. He wanted containment. That's when I understood something that made my hands shake. The smile at the funeral wasn't mine alone. It was inherited. By the time Lydia went on television crying about harassment, Detective Voss already had the envelope logged as evidence. By the time she claimed she was being targeted for being a grieving widow, the timeline showed she'd been planning for months. And by the time she tried to freeze accounts for her protection, the trust locked her out completely. Power doesn't disappear. It moves. And it was moving away from her fast. If you're still watching, stay sharp. This is where she fights back. Because Lydia didn't panic. She adapted. That's what made her dangerous. She hired a new attorney, younger, louder, one of those men who talks in press conferences and believes volume equals truth. He started sending letters, threats, accusations. He accused me of elder manipulation, of financial coercion, of emotional instability. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. Who do you think people believe first? The crying widow or the quiet old man? Comment it. Don't be polite. For a moment, the power shifted back to her. Accounts stalled, media leaned her way. Online strangers called me cruel, said I was exploiting grief. That's when Detective Voss called again. Mr. Delaney, she said, the toxicology report is back. I closed my eyes. She continued slowly. We found substances in his system that weren't prescribed, not lethal alone, but combined with exertion. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. My son didn't die peacefully. He died helped. And suddenly, the life insurance policy didn't look like preparation. It looked like intent. If you think this is where the cuffs come out, you're wrong. People like Lydia don't fall fast. They unravel. Next chapter, I'll tell you how she tried to flip the story completely, how she tried to turn me into the villain, and why her last move backfired so hard it exposed everything. Was this still an accident, or had it crossed the line? Say it.
The moment Lydia realized the paperwork wasn't bending, she stopped pretending to grieve. She went on offense. That's how you know the mask is slipping. Not always someone cries, but when they start recruiting an audience. If you've ever watched The Truth lose the first round because it wasn't loud enough, stay with me. This chapter explains why silence almost cost me everything. Her new attorney held a press conference on the courthouse steps, cameras everywhere, microphones like a picket fence. He didn't say my name at first. He didn't have to. He said an elderly relative had been confused, coerced, and manipulated by outside interests. Outside interests. I was sitting in my kitchen in North Carolina, hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold, watching a stranger describe me like a problem to be solved. They showed photos from the funeral, cropped just right. Her tears, my smile. That smile again. The anchor tilted her head and asked, "Do you think the father knew more than he's admitting?" That question spread like oil. Let me ask you something straight. How fast do you think public opinion turns on an old man who doesn't cry on cue? Commented, no filters. Within hours, the messages started. Some kind, most not. Monster, heartless, give her the house. People love a simple villain. Lydia knew that. She leaned into it. She released a statement saying she'd feared for her safety for months, said she'd felt financial pressure, said she'd been isolated. She never mentioned the envelope, never mentioned the safe deposit box, never mentioned the transfers. Because lies work best when they're selective. If you're still watching, don't scroll now. This is where the trap tightens.
The legal move came next. She filed for a protective order against me. Said I'd intimidated her, said I'd threatened to ruin her life. The irony almost made me laugh. Almost. For 24 hours, the power swung hard in her direction. Accounts were paused pending review. Investigators were told to avoid interference, and I was advised, politely, to keep quiet. That's the part nobody tells you. Silence feels like guilt when the other side won't shut up. I sat there, staring at my son's handwriting photocopied on the table, wondering if following his instructions, let systems do what people won't, had been a mistake. If you've ever doubted yourself at the worst possible moment, you know that feeling. And if you don't want to face it alone next time, subscribe. This isn't about drama, it's about survival. Detective Ilara Voss called late that night. Her voice was controlled, but I could hear something underneath it. Pressure. "She's claiming harassment," she said. "That complicates timing." "Is she lying?" I asked. "That's not the question," Voss said. "The question is what we can prove next." Prove next, because proof is what outlives noise. The next morning, Lydia made her biggest mistake. She tried to settle, quietly. Her attorney sent a message proposing closure. No admissions, no charges. She'd walk away from the house and the trust if the investigation lost momentum. Lost momentum. That phrase did something to Detective Voss. She forwarded the message to a federal office I won't name, because settlements don't look innocent when someone's already under a microscope. That single email cracked the door wide open. If you've ever watched someone panic and call it strategy, you know what happened next. Subpoenas. Not requests, orders. Bank records from 3 states, donation ledgers from senior centers, emails from a so-called consulting firm that had never paid rent anywhere. The narrative shifted, slowly, then all at once. One outlet ran a quiet correction, another used the word alleged. A third stopped calling me the father-in-law and started calling me the trustee. Titles matter. Lydia felt it slipping, so she escalated. She went live again, this time angrier, less composed. She said people were twisting her words. She said grief made her misunderstood. Then a reporter asked the wrong question. "Why did you try to access a safe deposit box 2 days after your husband's death?" Her face changed. Not grief, not anger, calculation. She said she didn't know what they were talking about, but the footage doesn't lie. And that was the moment the audience noticed something. Her tears stopped mid-sentence. If you saw that clip, be honest. Did you feel it too? That shift? Tell me below. That night, Detective Voss showed me a document she hadn't before. A draft. Written by Lydia. It wasn't sent. It wasn't signed. It was a contingency plan titled, "If Frank Interferes." Listed beneath it, legal intimidation, public narrative control, financial freeze requests, character framing. Character framing. I read it twice, then a third time. My son wasn't paranoid. He was being studied. If this doesn't make you uneasy, you're not paying attention. Subscribe. These stories don't come with sirens. By week's end, the protective order was denied. Lydia's attorney stopped returning calls, and a new development surfaced, one she couldn't talk her way out of. A witness. Someone from her charity work. An older man who recognized her voice on television and said, "That's the woman who told me my money would help children." It didn't. It helped build her contingency plans. And suddenly, the question wasn't whether she was grieving. It was who else she'd practiced on. Next chapter, I'll tell you about the hearing she thought would clear her name, the single sentence that flipped the room, and why for the first time, Lydia looked at me without speaking. Was she cornered, or was this still part of the act? Courtrooms have a smell. Old paper, stale coffee, fear, pretending to be confidence. I hadn't stepped inside one in years, but the moment I did, my body remembered. My back straightened, my jaw locked. This wasn't grief territory anymore. This was truth territory. Lydia arrived late on purpose. New suit, new hair, same smile, the one that tried to look calm but never quite reached her eyes. She didn't look at me when she sat down. She didn't need to. She thought today was for appearances. She thought this hearing would clean her image. If you've ever watched someone mistake a stage for a shield, you already know how this ends. And if you don't want to miss the turn, stay with me. The hearing wasn't criminal, not yet. It was about control, assets, authority, access. Her attorney spoke first. He painted her as overwhelmed, confused, targeted by institutions too big to fight. He used words like elder exploitation and financial abuse like seasoning, just enough to sting. Then he pointed at me, literally pointed. "This man," he said, "is using grief to justify stripping a widow of her home." I didn't move. I let him talk. Old men learn when to let someone hang themselves with their own confidence. When it was our turn, Mason stood, adjusted his glasses, calm as a lake that looks shallow until you step in. He didn't start with money. He didn't start with the house. He said one sentence, "Your Honor, we'd like to introduce Exhibit 14. Just a number, no drama. But Lydia shifted in her chair. That's when I knew she recognized it. The clerk handed the judge a single document. The room waited. The judge read silently at first, then again, slower. Then she looked up and asked Lydia one question. "Mrs. Rowe, why did you draft a contingency plan titled 'If Frank Interferes'?" The room went still. No coughing, no shuffling. Even the air felt like it stopped moving. Lydia's attorney leaned toward her, whispering urgently. She shook her head, once, sharp. "I don't know what that is," she said. Her voice didn't shake. That was the problem. Mason didn't argue. He nodded to the screen behind him, and there it was, her draft, time-stamped, authored, saved under her user profile. Bullet points, strategies, language colder than anything she'd said at the funeral. Legal intimidation, public narrative control, character framing. The judge looked at Lydia again. "You don't recognize your own writing?" That's when something cracked. Not loud, not dramatic, but permanent. If you've ever seen a confident liar realize they're alone, you know the look. And if you don't, subscribe now. These moments don't repeat. Her attorney tried to recover, claimed stress, claimed drafts didn't equal intent. Mason waited, then delivered the sentence that ended it. "Your Honor, this document was created 4 days before my client's son died." 4 days. That number echoed. The judge's pen froze midair. I felt every eye turn, not to Lydia, but to me. Because suddenly this wasn't a dispute over property. It was a question of timing and motive. The judge called a recess, short, tight, controlled. In the hallway, reporters whispered like kids who knew a secret before the bell rang. Lydia stood by the wall, arms crossed, jaw clenched. For the first time since the funeral, she looked at me. Really looked. No shouting, no acting, just calculation. That's when she realized something. I wasn't reacting. I was waiting. If you've ever been underestimated because you stayed quiet, this part is for you. Back inside, the judge returned with a tone I hadn't heard before. Measured, careful. "The court is suspending all asset access pending further review," she said. "Additionally, given the materials presented, I am referring this matter to the appropriate investigative bodies." Referred. That word changes lives. Lydia's attorney leaned over, whispered fast. She didn't respond. Her face had gone pale. Not afraid, cornered. Outside the courthouse, microphones swarmed her. She tried one last time, said she'd been misunderstood, said powerful men were protecting each other, said she'd never hurt anyone. Then a reporter asked a question that wasn't on the script. "Why did your husband file for divorce 2 days before his death?" Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. If you're watching this and your stomach just tightened, you're paying attention. Comment this: did that silence convince you more than any confession could? That night, Detective Alara Voss called. Her voice was different now. No caution, no hedging. "We've escalated," she said. "Financial Crimes Task Force, multi-state." "And the toxicology?" I asked. "Confirmed. Substances introduced gradually, non-lethal individually, designed to weaken." Designed. There are words you don't forget. I sat down hard in my chair. My son hadn't been reckless. He'd been targeted. Voss added one more thing before hanging up. She tried to access the house again today, she said, with movers. I closed my eyes. She didn't get in. That was the first time I felt something close to satisfaction. Not joy, not revenge, protection. And that's when I understood why my son trusted me with the last move. Because he knew something Lydia never did. I don't rush. I endure. And endurance outlasts performance every time. Next chapter, I'll tell you what happened when the charges finally dropped, what Lydia said when no cameras were left, and why the house, the one she screamed about, became the quietest witness of all. Do you think justice moves too slowly, or exactly when it should?
Charges don't arrive with thunder. They arrive with paperwork. Thick envelopes, stamped seals, language so calm it feels insulting after everything that came before. That's how it happened with Lydia. No handcuffs on the courthouse steps, no flashing lights, no dramatic walk to a patrol car. Just a quiet knock on her attorney's office door and a sentence that couldn't be argued with anymore. If you've ever waited for justice and wondered whether it was coming at all, stay with me. This chapter answers that question. I wasn't there when they told her. That was intentional. Detective Alara Voss said it was better that way. Said some people perform when they know they're being watched, others collapse when there's no audience left to save them. Lydia was the second kind. The charges weren't what the public expected, not at first. They didn't start with homicide. They started with wire fraud, financial exploitation, and conspiracy across state lines. Because prosecutors don't chase the biggest monster first, they drain the swamp. And Lydia had built herself a swamp out of charity events, polished smiles, and people who trusted her because she looked like someone they were supposed to trust. Senior centers, faith-based groups, community fundraisers, the kinds of places where nobody thinks to ask for receipts. If that makes you angry, it should. And if you want more stories where the quiet victims don't get erased, subscribe. These things don't fix themselves. Her accounts were seized within hours, every one of them. The consulting firm vanished overnight. Websites pulled, phone numbers disconnected. The office address turned out to be a mailbox above a closed nail salon. When the news finally caught up, the tone shifted fast. No more grieving widow. Now it was alleged scheme, multiple victims, expanding investigation. Funny how language changes once money starts talking back. That same day, I was asked to come in, not as a suspect, as a witness. I sat across from a federal investigator who looked too young to shave properly and answered questions about my son's habits, his routines, his state of mind. Then he asked something unexpected. "Did your son ever say goodbye?" I thought about that phone call, about the pause before he spoke, about the careful way he framed his words. "Yes," I said quietly. "He just didn't call it that." The investigator nodded. He understood. Lydia tried one last move. She requested a private meeting with me. No lawyers, no cameras, just us. At first, I said no. Then Detective Voss asked me a question that surprised me. "Do you want closure?" she asked, "or do you want answers? Those are not the same thing." So I agreed. The meeting room was small, gray walls, no windows. Lydia sat across from me, hands folded, nails chipped, no makeup, no performance. She looked smaller, not weak, just reduced. She didn't start with an apology. That would have been easy. She said, "He was going to leave me." I didn't respond. Her jaw tightened. "He was going to destroy everything I built." That sentence told me more than any confession could. Everything she built, not him, not them, her. She finally looked at me then. "Did you know," she asked, "about the box?" I said nothing. She nodded slowly, like she'd answered her own question. "You underestimated me," she said. "I thought you were just old." There it was,
That word again. Old. I smiled, not the funeral smile, a different one, sadder, quieter. My son did too, I said, at first, then he learned better. Her eyes filled, not with tears, with fear. Because fear shows up when someone realizes they never controlled the room. She asked me one last thing. Was it worth it, she said, dragging all this out? I leaned back in my chair and considered her question. Then I answered. This didn't drag out, it surfaced. She looked confused. That's the difference, I added. Dragging is when you pull something that doesn't want to move. The truth moves on its own. She didn't speak after that. The meeting ended. No forgiveness, no shouting, no dramatic ending. Just silence. The kind that follows understanding. A week later, more charges were added. Evidence tampering, attempted obstruction, false statements. Still no homicide charge. Yet. Those cases move slow. They require patience. They require certainty. And patience is something I have in excess. If you think justice should be fast, answer this honestly. Would you rather it be fast or permanent? Comment below. The house stayed empty. No lights, no music, no laughter. Neighbors stopped slowing down to stare. It became just another property on the street. But I knew better. That house had witnessed every lie, every late-night plan, every practiced tear, every assumption that no one was paying attention. Soon it would witness something else. Closure. Next chapter, I'll tell you what happened after the cameras left, what became of Lydia when no one was listening, and what I finally did with the house she screamed about. And I'll tell you this now. The ending people wanted wasn't the one that mattered most. Was justice served, or is something still missing?
The house sat empty longer than people expected. No for sale sign, no lights at night, no quick flip, just silence. That bothered some folks. They wanted a clean ending, a headline, a sentence they could underline and move on from. Life doesn't do that. Justice doesn't either. If you're still here, stay with me. This ending isn't loud, but it lasts. Lydia's case dragged the way big cases do. Slow, methodical, unforgiving. More victims came forward. People who had trusted her because she stood at the front of rooms and talked about helping others. People who didn't have the energy to fight back until they realized they weren't alone. That's how predators lose. Not in one blow, but in numbers. The homicide question never went away. It hovered. Toxicology reports were re-reviewed. Experts disagreed, then agreed on one thing that mattered. What my son ingested didn't belong in his body. Intent remained hard to prove, it always is, but the financial crimes didn't need intent the same way. They only needed patterns, and Lydia had left patterns everywhere. If you've ever wondered why some people walk free longer than they should, remember this: the slow grind catches what speed misses. Subscribe if you believe that. I was asked once why I never moved back into the house. Truth is, I couldn't. Not because of fear, because of memory. Every room held echoes that didn't belong to me anymore. I could still see my son standing in the doorway, talking about planting fruit trees. Still hear him laughing about how the soil needed work. The house had served its purpose. It had held the truth long enough. So I did something else. I transferred it. Not to myself, not to family, not for profit. I donated it. A local foundation took it over, one that helps families who lose someone suddenly and don't have time to think straight. They turned it into a temporary place, quiet, neutral, no cameras. Some people called it poetic, others called it petty. I didn't call it anything. I called it done. What would you have done with that house? Sell it? Burn it? Give it away? Tell me, I want to hear your answers. Lydia never came back, not to the house, not to the spotlight. Her attorney changed twice. Her friends vanished faster. The last I heard, she was living quietly, fighting charges one hearing at a time. Her name now attached to phrases she'd spent years outrunning. No more speeches, no more tears on command, just consequences.
Some viewers want me to say I forgive her. I don't. I also don't hate her. Hatred takes energy. Energy is for the living. What I feel is something older, final. People still ask about that smile, the one at the funeral. They ask if it was cruel, if it was calculated, if it meant I knew something everyone else didn't. Here's the truth. That smile wasn't about revenge. It was recognition. In that moment, standing there with my son in the ground and his wife shouting, I realized something with absolute clarity. She thought the story was over. I knew it was just starting. And knowing the difference changes how you stand. I spend my days quietly now, garden in the mornings, volunteer twice a week, sit with men who've buried more than they planned to and don't talk about it unless the coffee's gone cold. Sometimes someone recognizes me. Sometimes they ask, "Do you regret it?" they say. I always answer the same way. No, I tell them. I honored my son. That's not revenge. That's duty. If you've ever had to protect someone who couldn't protect themselves anymore, you understand. And if you don't, remember this story, because one day you might. I'll leave you with this. Lydia screamed, "Get out of my house." She was wrong about two things. It wasn't her house, and I never really left. The truth stayed behind, waiting. Was justice served, or was this the only ending possible? Drop your verdict in the comments. And if stories like this help you see the world a little clearer, subscribe before the next one finds you.